Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Berry with Evernote's product team, and I'm sitting down with Ian to do a little bit of a Q&A today. You might notice the background is a little bit different. That's because this behind the scenes is coming to you live from our homes. So that's what's different. Hi Ian, last time we did a Q&A, you did this with Shane, and you were able to sit directly across from him. And things feel a little different now. Would you like to talk a little bit about how they're different?
Hi, Jeff. Good to see you too. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now in the U.S. and around the world. I think the fact that we're shooting from home is probably the least of our concerns in the big picture, and I'm more than happy to talk about that a little later on. I'm just happy from the standpoint of this video that we're actually able to do it at all. And my hat's off actually to folks who have helped us put this together so that we can continue to communicate to our users and tell them what's going on at Evernote.
I think a good jumping off point is your recent blog post. It mentioned that we've been making real progress since last we did the last BTS video. Can we talk a little bit about what's been happening at Evernote?
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest set of progress we've really made is that we're starting to get the new client builds out into the world in the form of preview releases. Now, there's a lot of language that people are obviously familiar with in the world of software. You've heard about betas, you've heard about alphas. You might be wondering what the heck is a preview. I know that you, Jeff, are intimately familiar with this since you actually product manage our Windows and Mac releases. So we can go back and forth a bit on this. But a preview release really is a mechanism for us to get a build out into the hands of our users, out into the wild. That is a pre-beta, right? So it's not feature complete. It's not performance ready. It's not finished by any shape or form, but it is stable and it is reliable, and we feel fine putting it in the hands of our users for them to use on their production accounts. But those preview builds allow us to get really early feedback about things like features and performance and UX. And so we're now at a point where we're actually generating those builds every 2 weeks across Mac and Windows and iOS and Android. Um, and every 2 weeks, those builds move forward. And I feel like actually that's a huge step forward compared to where we were a number of months ago.
So can you talk? So let's I think narrow it down. You talked about features, you talked about UX, you talked about performance. I think internally we know performance has been a very big topic of discussion and topic of focus for our engineering team. Is there any a little bit more maybe you can talk to us about performance in particular?
Absolutely. We when we set out to do this sort of top to bottom rebuild of the Evernote service, what I talked about at the beginning of last year, we knew it was a massive undertaking. And frankly, we didn't always know exactly what we were getting into. If you'd stopped to actually figure out everything you were getting into, you'd probably never do it, which is why most companies don't. Um, uh, but when you do that, you actually are rebuilding multiple pieces simultaneously, and you don't quite know how they're going to work together when you put them together. And in fact, we've seen that. We've seen that with every single one of our builds and with all the services, that when we actually start to put the pieces together into a fully functional unit, it doesn't perform the way we want it to. Now, that doesn't mean that we've built it incorrectly or that we have to go back to the beginning and start all over again. It means that we haven't figured out all the small interactions between each of these individually well built pieces that result in like performance hiccups and performance slowdowns. And so, really, for the last, I don't know, I would say it's 8, 10 weeks now, we've had an enormous focus on performance across the board on all our releases. And I think even from your standpoint on the Mac and Windows front, it wasn't that long ago that we were really only trying to run that build against accounts with what, maybe 5,000 notes in them.
Yep.
Now we're doing performance testing on accounts that have 50,000 notes in them and more. And so that's kind of a 10x improvement. And I know right now we're up to north of 25,000 test users that we have out there against the Mac and Windows builds.
Um,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, so that's performance. I think on the features and UX side, we've been leaning on, frankly, and learning a lot from our beta testers. Every time we release, I think your blog post talked a lot about the release cadence that we put in place, that commitment to always improving the application. Frankly, every 2 weeks, we're putting out a new build. What kind of learning do you feel like we've been getting from our customers?
Well, I think part of it is real learning, and part of it is unfortunately the side effect of inflicting some pain in the preview process. And we don't do that intentionally, but some of the early previews were so stripped down from a feature standpoint because remember, one of the things I said up front was that these things are solid and we're willing to have actual users use these on their production accounts. So we focus first on reliability more than anything. We can't have people using these builds with their production accounts if there is like any kind of significant risk in using them. So, that's meant that the early builds were like functionally incredibly stripped down. And I think, we scared some people, frankly, early on because they're like, is this what you're going to release? It's like, no, 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 no. We're so early yet. We're still building. But we're early enough to start getting feedback. And I think, through that dialogue that we had, with users, some of which admittedly, unfortunately, came from a place of fear. We really heard the features that were most important to get in first. I think despite the fact that we've had this performance focus for the last 2.5 months now, like literally right now, there are some builds coming together which have significant new feature sets in them that are catching up more and more with what people are used to. And I think when we're trying to make this entire experience more coherent and consistent, that means we're creating a lot of change. Because if you look at the current Mac release and you look at the current Windows release, you wouldn't honestly know they came from the same company. And if we're trying to bring those together into a more coherent experience, which is, something that we said, because we don't just want to make those like each other. We want to make that feel like the mobile builds, feel like the web builds. So you always know where everything is. You know what it can do, and it's all going to be there. That process has been very much a learning process also. And there have been things that we've gone back in and completely redesigned.
Building a completely new application from the ground up, like the feedback has been so incredibly important from customers in order to help us prioritize what we put first and what we actually kick off in the client. And I think we're going to see a lot of that, like you said, in the next few preview releases that we have ready to go. Without them, I think we wouldn't be where we are. And frankly, even after we get something out, the most exciting thing for me is when they're actually helping us fine tune it, right? Like we put something out there, and there are 2 or 3 things that would make their workflow that much better. It's been really it's been really amazing to see that come out and be able to react to it, both in the forums and in the surveys we've been sending out.
Yeah, there's big feedback that is important, but there's also always these little tiny points of, hey, this thing that you did when with the redesign now makes this part of tags harder to use. Like, oh, okay, right, got it. We can fix that. And go off and work on that. And hopefully a few weeks later, maybe 4 weeks later, maybe 6 weeks later, bam, here's a new version that actually addresses that piece of feedback. And I think this whole release cadence of pushing out every 2 weeks is a place obviously the company hasn't been certainly since I've been here. And something that allows us to be that much more responsive to the things that we learn as we learn them. And I think that, maintaining that cadence, not just through the preview process and the beta process, but our plan is fully to maintain that cadence once we're in general release. This is the way we are going to run the company going forward, is to be that much more agile than we have been.
As we get closer to beta, like what are you particularly excited about? We're moving from preview. That next big milestone for us is beta. What excites you about that?
I am excited about getting to beta and getting to GA because, frankly, these new clients as they become more feature complete and as they become performant, they're a delight to use. We have talked a lot over the last year and a half about some of the speed bumps that exist in the current clients, and our desire to try to iron out these speed bumps and just make things work a little better. And one of the things I've seen. Oh, look, my dog has come to say hello. Hello, dog. So one of the things that I think is fantastic about these new clients is, frankly, they're a delight to use. When I look at the mobile client, I spend all of my time right now in the new mobile client, not in the existing release of the mobile client, because the new one is just so much better than the old one, and I'm excited about getting that out into the hands of a much bigger population when we're ready to get there.
Well, okay, I think that covers most of what we wanted to talk about
Oh
today.
no! Let's talk about the cloud.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, the cloud.
The cloud is an interesting thing at Evernote, right? Because people use the clients, but the clients are fundamentally powered and enabled by all the systems in the cloud. And more than that, historically, the clients haven't just been enabled by the systems in the cloud, they've also been constrained by the systems in the cloud. And so while it's not anything that anybody sees firsthand, everything we're doing in the cloud to modernize our infrastructure isn't just setting us up for the clients that we're going to release, it's setting us up for the next 2 years that comes after that. Because there's so many things in Evernote that people ask, well, why can't you just do this? Why can't you do this? And I completely understand why someone says it doesn't seem that hard. Why can't you just, add this piece of functionality? And the answer almost always has been because our cloud is not structured that way, and we would have to completely re-engineer the cloud to enable us to do that. And honestly, that's kind of what we're doing, is completely re-engineering our cloud at the same time as everything else. And not last time, but I think it was 3 or 4 videos ago, we talked about moving all the notes from our old, much more constrained storage system to a new horizontally scalable cloud storage system. And I had a mirror, and we had this cool metaphor about the dining room and the wedding reception and all the rest. And we talked about that. We just recently finished pulling off another one of those, which is, the last time we moved the notes, but we didn't actually move all the metadata that describes who owns which note and who has access to which note and, things like that. So all the data that described how the notes relate to each other and who owns which notes and all the rest are still back in the old world for us. And actually recently we finished migrating all the permissions data to a new scalable cloud architecture, which actually means that performance issues related to ownership and permissions issues are going to go away in future builds. It means we're going to be able to be more flexible about the things that we build. It removes barriers to building new kinds of functionality in the future. And again, just like we moved 10 plus billion notes without anybody noticing, we moved all this permission information without anybody noticing over the last about 2 months now. And so those things also, they're less visible, but they're actually just as important, because they're what's going to let us move forward faster and start to address some of the things that people have asked, frankly, for a long time from Evernote. We're actually finally going to be able to say yes to some of them.
And then my apologies to the ops team. Like as a product guy, I was totally focused on that. So it's totally true. Like without the architecture, none of this would even be happening. I think then that covers now everything from the product side to all of the infrastructure changes that we've been making over the past six months, I would say. But I did want to, I think, touch briefly on, at the very top of this conversation, you touched briefly about everything that's going on in the world right now. I kind of think we ought to spend a little bit of time talking about that. How do you think the team at Evernote is doing?
I think clearly there's 2 things going on in the world right now that are highly relevant. One of them is coronavirus, and the other is racism. Um, Coronavirus is a lot easier to talk about. Let's do that first. When the pandemic hit, we, like anybody else, needed to figure out how to react to it. We went to a remote work posture almost immediately as a company early in March. I've actually been surprised at how well it's gone, and we're very lucky as a company, honestly, to be able to do that. I mean, as a software company, we can work from home. We can keep making progress. We can keep working on the software for our customers. And so we're very lucky compared to lots of other companies out there and lots of other people out there that don't have that same situation. I won't say it's been perfect, obviously. Anyone who's doing this working from home knows that, juggling, I don't know, working from home, your personal life, maybe being a parent, homeschooling, any of those things is a lot. And it's been a lot for a bunch of our folks as well. But I would say we've adapted. We are now doing about as well as I think we could do in this kind of working from home stance. It's going pretty well. I think the second topic is obviously a much more difficult topic. As we're filming this, it's been about a week, a little over a week since George Floyd was murdered. And I can't think of anybody who wasn't shocked, shattered when they saw that video. And that is the same for everybody who works at Evernote. I can't possibly understand what it is like to live with the inequities and the inequalities and discrimination that so many black and brown people who live here in the U.S. deal with every day. I can't. But I know that we have to do something about that. And, it's easy to say that there is no place for racism and violence. And we have said that. But saying things isn't enough. We know that. We've seen that. The only thing that will fix this is action. And so we have taken action. We've started to take action as individuals and as a team. We are starting to talk inside the company about what more we can do, because ultimately we believe that the only way to combat this is through action, whether that's actions taken as individuals, actions taken as a team, or actions taken as a company. It's early days, and we're still figuring out what that all means. But we know what we stand for here at Evernote, and we stand against this.
I know when we first set out to make this video and give these updates, this really wasn't what we were planning. But thank you for sharing that. All the things that we've been talking about internally, the action that we've been taking, it's super important. So thank you.
Well, thank you for doing this video with me, and I look forward to continue to make progress as a company, and I look forward to continue to make progress as a country.
And thanks to everyone who's joined us today, spending the time watching the video. We hope to bring you another behind the scenes video soon, and please be safe out there. Thank you.